1,000 CIOs every year. I'm going to be offering you my humble perspective about convergence and hyperconvergence. The difference being that convergence can be a convergence of two elements, whereas mathematically, hyper typically means something greater than 4. I'll be talking about 14 elements converging, and I'll offer some insight into SimpliVity and how we fit into this notion of hyperconvergence. I'll pick up the speed as we go. This is interesting. This gentleman is called John Doerr. He's not as well known as Warren Buffett. However, he's the most known and arguably the most successful investor in high tech. He's one of our investors, and he believes that SimpliVity is likely the biggest innovation since VMware. Secondly, though I'm going to be talking about hyperconvergence, you'll notice that SimpliVity views itself as a data virtualization company, because we believe that in order to converge more than just 2 elements or 4 elements, but rather all 14, what's required is a change in the data architecture. In terms of agenda, I'll give you a quick update about SimpliVity. I'll share with you our view of what is the problem that needs to be solved, our solution to the problem. I'll talk about the path to hyperconvergence, which in my mind boils down to converging the best of both worlds. On one hand, we believe that CIOs in the market wants to run everything on x86 commodity servers. This is what we believe that the web companies are doing. However, do that without compromising enterprise capabilities. What capabilities? Protection, performance, data efficiency, and the notion of unified global management. We'll talk more about that. I'll offer you a little insight about SimpliVity's ecosystem, and I'll open it to questions and answers, and I'll pick up the speed. So SimpliVity was founded about 5 years ago, September 2009, and we spent 3.5 years developing our technology until, for the first time in April 2013, offering it on 1.0 basis to customers. Now, this might sound normal, but an average startup, an average technology company spends no more than 18 to 24 months before delivering a product to its customers, because otherwise you don't get funded. So if you start a company, you go to investors and you tell them it's going to take you more than 18 or 24 months to put the first product in the hands of customers, you don't get funded. I worked for IBM and I worked for EMC, and those companies, again, if you have an idea and it's going to take you more than 18 or 24 months to deliver the first version to end users, you don't get funded. So philosophically, think about it. If you can't deliver something in 18 or 24 months, it doesn't get funded. Well, what if the problem is too great to solve in 18 or 24 months? It doesn't get funded. It took us 3.5 years to develop and deliver the first version because we believed that there are elements in the technology, I'll refer to those elements, that cannot be added after the fact. So our bet was spend more time in the oven, deliver a complete infrastructure. I'll share more about that momentarily, because there are elements that cannot be added after the fact. We'll see if that pays off. Our humble mission has been to simplify IT. I don't know if you played with Legos. I did. I always thought that was simple. And our mission is to deliver the best of both worlds. On one hand, x86 cloud economics. In other words, all of the IT services that we buy, and I'll count them later, about 14 different products from different vendors, all of them run on commodity x86 resources. However, do that without compromising enterprise capabilities. There are 3 technology themes that I'm going to be talking about. One is the fact that everything that we've developed is meant to run on x86, any x86 server. Secondly, is the notion of global federation. We think that IT shops are distributed, and we developed a technology that allows a single person to manage the global federation of systems from a single site, single monitor. And thirdly, there's this notion of data virtualization that I'm going to be referring to later. We are a VMware partner. We're proud of that. However, we're hypervisor agnostic, and in our lab right now, we're working on Hyper-V and KVM. And lastly, our investors include some of the smartest money. I already referenced Kleiner Perkins and John Doerr, Excel. Those two are arguably in the top 3 investors globally. And we've never had a problem raising capital. So this is not a race in terms of who raises more capital, but capital has not been a challenge for us. Momentum. So we started shipping just 6 quarters ago. We just closed our 6th quarter of selling. And according to our investors, no other IT infrastructure company has grown as fast as SimpliVity has in the last 6 quarters. Our customers include some of the largest companies in the world. You all know T-Mobile. Petrobras is the 30th largest company in the world. This is a gas and oil company out of Brazil. However, and relevant to Vology, 80% of our customers are in what we call commercial space. Those are companies that generate about or no more than $2 billion in annual revenue. And what's fascinating to us is that 65% of those customers, 65%, run all of their IT across 2 or more sites exclusively on our systems. I'll explain what that means, but think about it. They're running all of their IT applications on our platforms on 2 or more sites. City of Arvada, right here, is the first of about 15 cities in the United States to do that as well. They run all of their IT across 2 or more sites exclusively on our systems, including their 911 application. So when we talk about running on x86 without compromising enterprise capabilities, 911 application is something I consider mission critical. This is a Tech Validate report. Basically, they reached out to about 55 of our customers to check what applications run on our systems. You'll notice that 78% of our customers run SQL database on our systems. You'll see Microsoft Exchange, Oracle, SharePoint, SAP, VDI, and I mentioned 911. This is not a technology for some niche tier 3 application. This is not just a VDI solution. 65% of the customers run everything across 2 or more sites on those systems. And we've won some awards. I'm not going to share all of those awards with you, but here are some that I think are interesting and indicative. This is VMworld Gold for backup and storage in virtualized environments. What people expect is that if you're going to buy a converged or a hyper-converged solution, you're going to get a lot of functionality. However, you're going to make some compromises. In other words, you're going to give a little back, or you're not going to get the same quality on some of those capabilities. Nobody wants to compete in the storage and backup category at VMworld because all the big guys are playing there. We won that category by virtue of our data virtualization company that I'll talk about later. We won other awards. This is the best converged infrastructure product of the year. And even Gartner identified us. So they started running some analysis on what they call and what we refer to as integrated systems. I'll differentiate it later among integrated systems, what we call convergence 1.0, then convergence, which is 2.0, and hyperconvergence, which is 3.0, and the third phase in the evolution of convergence. Gartner were actually focused on 1.0, integrated systems. And then they were surprised by the fact that the train has moved on, and I give them a lot of credit for being such a conservative and responsible company, recognizing us just 6 months after we started selling. So in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, we are perceived as a visionary. This is us in a VMware showroom in Munich. So in numerous VMware showrooms around the world, you'll see our systems, these blue-eyed babies right here. And that tells you a little bit about how important it is for us to fit very well into the VMware infrastructure. They're one of our very important partners. So let me share with you humbly what I think CIOs are telling me. So when I meet CIOs around the world, what they tell me is that they're inspired by these companies, Facebook, Google, Amazon, who presumably run all of their IT on commodity x86 resources, basically commodity servers, right? However, those CIOs tell me that this is not good enough typically for their applications. They say, I can't run my gear on that type of architecture. And I say, well, why not? And they say, well, for the most part, the way that these companies treat their applications or their VMs is the way that a chicken farmer treats chicken. You get a lot of copies of those VMs, but you don't get the specialized service and functionality that I need. Speak with my DBAs. They treat my applications the way that a puppy lover treats a puppy. Doron takes them for a walk in the morning. Barry feeds them for lunch. I need a lot of capabilities around my VMs. I don't get that on the cloud. In fact, they say, come into my data center, you're immediately going to see a lot of screens and a lot of different products in those racks, about 14 of them. And I ask, well, how did that come about? I'll say, well, let me show you. Approximately 20 or 30 years ago, I think Andy was referring to mainframes, all of IT was already converged. It was in these containers. Each one of the containers had storage, compute resources, ran a single operating system, and virtualization. Basically, mainframes had some virtualization, a single application. So one application, one operating system, storage, and servers. And then in the 90s, EMC and Data General, for those of you who remember, basically pulled storage out of those silos. And now storage is a single shared resource pool that's available to the servers. There's no longer storage in the servers. So this is a very powerful concept, and VMware 14 years ago does the same thing to the server line. So basically now servers become a single shared resource pool. So we get significant enhancement in utilization on storage and separately the servers. What happens in the cloud, what happens in the web scale model is that the server and the storage come together. This is convergence of storage and servers, and that is very efficient. However, say the CIOs, that's not enough for me. I need more than convergence of just servers and storage, because I have a remote data center. And between those two data centers, I have a very thick pipe. That is a very expensive pipe. So what do? Notice now we're starting the attack of appliances. Let's count them. First, I buy WAN optimization devices. What do? They dedupe, compress, and optimize the pipe, the WAN. But wait, I also need a backup deduplication device, say Data Domain. These are great companies. What do? They dedupe, compress, and optimize the backup. These two are not interchangeable. You need to buy one system to make your WAN more efficient, and you need to buy another system, actually two or more, in order to make your backup more efficient. What do? They condense the data, because as Andy says, there's a lot of data. Now, when the cloud arrives, and by the way, Amazon Web Services went live in 2006. Interestingly, it took Gartner 3 years to identify them as a visionary on Magic Quadrant, 3 years. But since that has happened, we now have other companies, other appliances. What do? They offer a gateway to the cloud. This could be a company like StoreSimple that was acquired by Microsoft. They offered a gateway to Azure. What do? They dedupe, compress, and optimize the data that goes to the cloud. So we now have 3 different technologies. Each one of them makes the data more efficiency. These are efficiency systems. Now, when I joined EMC in 1998, we were shipping 18 gigabyte drives. Today, vendors ship 6 terabyte drives. At the prior VMworld, I saw 8 terabyte drives. So the density of the drives increased 300-fold. What about the performance, the RPM of the drives? 1.5x. So we have this much density on the drive, but performance hasn't improved. It's as if we were drinking with a straw out of a cup. Now we're drinking with a straw out of a swimming pool. So we can no longer trust HDD for performance. So what do? We deploy SSD arrays, income performance enhancement products, and SSD caching. And there's also SSD in the server, and there's also SSD in the storage. And by the way, most of them, because SSD is expensive, offered either deduplication and or compression, but just for the SSD. So we've talked about efficiency products, and then we added performance products, and in association with the performance products, there's typically some efficiency product. But again, each one of those efficiency products deals with one phase in the life cycle of the data, just the SSD, or the HDD, or the WAN, or the backup, or the route to the cloud. What's missing here? Protection. If you walk into a large enterprise, they might have TSM and NetBackup for some of the high-end applications, and then potentially Commvault and Backup Exec for other applications, and maybe even Avamar at a remote site. What does Avamar do? It dedupes the data. So now we have efficiency products also in association with protection. Now, if you count all those systems, there are about 12 to 14 different products here. So when we talk about convergence or hyperconvergence, again, it's not only about putting together a server and storage. What about the rest of this stuff? Customers buy all this gear from as many vendors, and then they need to train as many people on those products, and then they need to manage all these products from as many panes of glass, P-A-N-E, but also P-A-I-N. Now, there's nothing wrong with these products. These are best-in-class products. Much respect for any one of them. They offer enterprise capabilities, protection, performance, data efficiency, and lots of it. And there's this slippery notion of how do we manage everything globally. Let's assume that that happens in this stack. I'm not sure it does. So when we talk about hyperconvergence and when we talk about the challenge of CIOs, what they say is, I can't just converge storage and servers the way that web companies do. What do I do with the rest of these kids, the rest of these 10 products? So what I'm going to share with you is that SimpliVity is actually putting all these products together. As a rational audience, you're going to have two questions in your mind. One is what Doron telling us about SimpliVity worthy? Is this relevant to my environment? And the second is it possible? Let's simplify discussion. Don't worry about whether it's possible. Just see if this is an interesting story for you. Check if it's possible later, because if it's not interesting, it doesn't really matter if it's possible. So let's go over the story. Let's reconstitute this stack of about 12, 14 different products that I presented earlier. For servers running VMware, then we have a storage switch. You know which companies offer a storage switch. And then we have highly available shared storage, and then I have an SSD array. And some companies are already combining those two. They have SSD together with the hard disk drive. So you could say they converge 2 of the 14 elements. And then we have a backup deduplication appliance, and then a WAN optimization and deduplication appliance, and a cloud gateway, and storage caching, and we have some data protection capabilities. It could be TSM, it could be net backup, it could be Veeam, it could be Zerto. Somebody mentioned Zerto to me today. Yes, that's another very capable product. We have a lot of respect for all those products. What we do, or what we have done, is we looked at that stack 5 years ago and we asked ourselves, what's the problem here? Why do we need so many products in order to do our job? And by the way, is there a single industry in the world that requires the end user to buy and integrate as many products in order for her to accomplish her job? Whenever I try to give my mother an example of what SimpliVity does, I can't point to any other industry where that happens. Or my dad, for that matter. We believe that there's a problem with the data. Not only the volume of data, but the architecture of the data. And I won't get into too many details about that, but basically applications think about the data in 4 or 8K data sets. Then the storage companies historically take those very small data sets and they put them in very large logical containers. And then all the management, the protection, the mobility occurs on very large containers of data. And those containers have tremendous amount of redundancy. So basically, without getting too detailed in that particular area of the conversation, but notice that storage over time developed its own terminology. There are LANs and RAIDs and shares. It's a complete different domain. What we believed is that by solving the data problem, and I'll share with you some of what we do momentarily, you can basically hyper-converge all of this stack. And please suspend your disbelief, but what I'll tell you is we take all 14 products, not 2, not 3, and all of them run on each one of these cubes. A cube is basically an x86 server with our bezel. I hope you like the design. An accelerator card that I'll share with you about momentarily. And basically all the functionality that's on the left, remember, don't worry if it works or not, just see if the story is interesting. All of the functionality that's on the left is offered in this cube. So it includes a server running VMware today. Tomorrow it'll run Hyper-V and KVM. It includes the SSD capabilities, the AGD capabilities, the protection, all the data efficiency, deduplication, compression, optimization, global unified management, everything that's on the left. With 2 of them, you get high availability. If you want, in addition to the functionality and the high availability, all the usable capacity and IOPS, you need maybe a 3rd or a 4th system. And if we summarize, one person manages all these cubes locally and remotely. You might have cubes in London, in Austin, Texas, in New York, doesn't really matter. All of them are managed by one person from vCenter today. In the future, it's going to be other management systems, but notice that we didn't want to force upon the customers our own UI. So we plug into the UI that we think the customer wants. So if you're a VM admin, she can manage the global federation, as we call it, from a single screen. One person, single screen, runs everything. The total cost of ownership is reduced by 3x. How is that possible? Well, if it all runs on x86, as the story suggests, and if you run it globally, and if it includes all the functionalities on the left, just think about the CapEx and think about the OpEx. Just think about the space savings, the environmentals, the labor, and the gear. So that's our story. And if that story really holds true, then you get the best of both worlds. On one hand, x86 economics, because we're running on x86, and enterprise capabilities, best of both worlds. So let's pick up the speed. So into this aquarium, or zoo, or whatever you want to call it, let's introduce two x86 boxes. Now, in order to do everything that I just shared with you, radical technology is required. The one that it took us 3.5 years to develop. The one that we think you cannot add after the fact. You cannot rebuild your product in order to include that. All of this needs to be part of the foundation. So one of the technologies, this is not the technology, it's a part of the technology, is an accelerator card. This is a PCIe card that plugs into the x86 server. It includes NVRAM that's protected with supercapacitors, and that allows us to persist the data very quickly as the data is written from the applications, such that latency is very low. At the same time, in an FPGA on that card, in a processor, we deduplicate, compress, and optimize all the data as it's written by the applications in 4 or 8K once and forever globally. So there's nothing left to dedupe, compress, and optimize after that. So if you think about all these products that do deduplication, compression, optimization, if this story holds, they have nothing left to dedupe, compress, and optimize. All of that happens as the data is written by the applications. So it happens at the point of initiation, at the point of origin. So you would say, Doron, what are you doing? You're getting in the data path. You're going to slow down the data. Counterintuitively, we accelerate the data because we persist very quickly on 2 cubes simultaneously, on 2 cards simultaneously, and very importantly, we deduplicate the IOPS. Whenever I say that, customers typically take notes because nobody's heard of that before. Now, Barry didn't tell you, but I was founder and CEO of a company named Diligent Technologies that was one of the pioneers in data deduplication in backup. And in 2008, we were acquired by IBM. But in 2006, after we had already sold hundreds of systems to AT&T, I presented to the board and I said, you know, I think we can be a large company. We're not going to be a very large company. And the board said, why? Everything's going so well. I said, think about it. We addressed the data problem very late in its life cycle, the way that these guys do. They deduplicate, compress, and optimize the data when it's being backed up. What if somebody's going to solve that problem further upstream? We're out of a job. So after Diligent was acquired from IBM, by IBM, one of the things that we were thinking about is how early in the life cycle of the data can we solve that problem? And we're the only ones who do it at the point of initiation, as the application writes the data for the first time. So we call that accelerated global pre-dupe. I hope you like the name. Pre-dupe, basically. And as I've already explained, we dedupe, compress, and optimize everything once and forever across all the phases of the life cycle of the data. We don't have to dedupe, compress, and then undedupe, uncompress. So there are no series, once and forever, and we keep it global. So if all of that is true, then here's what happens. We already shared with you that we won gold for storage and backup at the VMworld show. So we do the job of the storage. There are also already drives inside that server, and we offer the logic around that. So primary storage runs inside the box. Now you're going to say, Doron, you just exaggerated. This is a large box going into a small box. Well, at VMworld, I was presenting to some audience, and I always check, are there any of our customers in the room? And there were a few. Of course, I knew that in advance. And I asked one of them, well, what are you running right now? This is a manufacturer out of Syracuse, New York. They do about $1.5 billion per year in sales. And in Q3 last year, they were going to buy SAN across 2 sites, data domain across 2 sites, a backup application. Instead, they bought 6 SimpliVity OmniCubes that they deploy 4 and 2. On them, they run 8 SQL databases, 4 Exchange servers, 150 VDI desktops, and 30 other applications that I don't remember. So I asked, and by the way, they run active-active, so they run production on both sides, and they back up across using our technology. So I asked that customer, how much logical data do you have on those 6 systems? He said 3.3 petabytes. 3.3 petabytes. How much physical space do those 3.3 petabytes occupy? 70 terabytes. So this is impossible, right? We're talking about over 100 to 1 deduplication compression. Well, the reason that is possible is as follows. With this technology, you can decide how frequently you copy a virtual machine, or all of them. And that's the first thing that you need to decide, frequency of copy. It's a full backup, basically. And then how frequently you move those copies across to other sites, and how long you maintain that data, how long you wait until you expire it. That particular customer, like many of our other customers, takes up a full copy of all the VMs every 10 minutes. So the recovery point objective is 10 minutes. Think about it. That means that they multiply their data every 10 minutes. That's 150 times per day, right? 6 times per hour times 24. So we can see how they get to 3.3 petabytes quite rapidly. However, how much new data is created every 10 minutes? Very little. That's your deduplication ratio. So there's no trick here. This customer indeed has a very fine RPO and RTO, recovery point objective, recovery time objective, and they get significant deduplication. Maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe not. Let's put the storage in the box. Now, if we already dedupe, compress, and optimize all the data, you don't need to do it in the WAN. We've already done it. You don't need to do it in backup. We've already done it. Let's connect those remote sites with a thin pipe, because you don't need a thick pipe. This cloud gateway shouldn't be more than a feature. So today, we allow you to backup and restore from Amazon. We're going to offer that on other clouds. Today, you can't run your applications there on our systems, but you can use it as a backup restore target. Now, of course, there is SSD in our system. Who would develop a system in the 21st century without SSD? And we're very efficient with SSD because we dedupe, compress, and optimize all the data in 4 or 8K before it ever hits the SSD. So you don't need the SSD array or the SSD caching or the data protection. We want gold for data protection. On a per virtual machine basis, the VM admin can decide how often we take a full backup, where is that copied to, locally, remotely, and when do we expire it. Let's add another cube for high availability and clarify that any data that is written is always written to at least 2 cubes in one data center. So even if somebody takes a cube away from you, you still have all your data on the other cube. And we run ESXi on the box, and this is our virtual controller. By the way, I can share with you an architectural mistake that we've made. I don't want you to think that I'm only telling you what's good about SimpliVity. And that is our name is too long, SimpliVity. We can't fit it here. So SVT is short for SimpliVity. That's our virtual controller. So basically on a server, we run our logic on a virtual machine, and we have our card inside the system. We run the VMs on those systems. We connect to the public cloud. And our belief is that in 10 years looking back, most of IT, as I think Michael Dell believes, most of IT is going to run like that. So what does that offer? It all runs on x86. So you have x86 cloud economics. However, if the story holds, it also offers enterprise capabilities. So CIOs no longer have an excuse not to run on this architecture because it offers the best of both worlds. The core innovation, I'm not going to get too deeply into that, starts with the data. So what we had to do for 3.5 years, 43 months to be exact, is develop a new architecture where the data is granular, dedupe, compress, and optimize once and forever, and is kept that way global, which means that whenever cubes in Austin, Texas, speaking cubes in Milan, Italy, they know what they're talking about. They can all be managed by one person. Around that accelerated technology, accelerated global pre-dupe technology, we had to develop the global file system so the nodes can speak with each other. We believe that these elements cannot be offered after the fact. If we're right, our investors are going to be very happy because it means that none of the existing players will be able to add those capabilities after the fact. And around that data architecture, around it, we developed all the functionality, and we're going to be adding more and more functionality. This is the underlying technology. Now, let's put this in perspective because everybody's talking about convergence. Let's start on the left with what we call the legacy stack. It includes all those 12, 14 products that we referenced earlier. Then, in 2009, a new company changed all of that. We have a lot of respect for them. They're called VCE, VCE FlexPod. We think of that as Convergence 1.0. And this is a wonderful thing for the industry and for SimpliVity because they created a new category. As a young company, the last thing that you want is to develop the category yourself. It makes everything more expensive to convince customers, etc. They created this market. What they do, if you think about it, is they take the torso, they take the server virtualization, storage switch, and primary storage, they put it in one container with a new management layer that they developed. And the result is that the customers get enhanced deployment and easier management of this particular part of the stack. Their mission was not to solve the data problem. For that reason, you need to buy the data domain, the riverbed, the protection capabilities separately. You need to integrate them around this solution. But this is a great first step. Then comes Convergence 2.0. And companies that we have a lot of respect for in that particular category are Nutanix. And I would say that VMware's EvoRail that was just launched, is in this category as well. What they do very well is they take the same torso, everything that is above the dotted line, basically the server, the storage switch, primary storage, and the virtualization layer, say VMware, and they assimilate them. If you recall earlier, I talked about convergence, including the server and the storage resources being assimilated into one technological entity. This is actually innovation. This is a new technology, and this part is very efficient. By the way, this company, Nutanix, started in September 2009, just like SimpliVity. And they've been selling for quite some time, and they're very successful. What we say that we do is basically we hyper-converge everything. Not just everything above the dotted line, but everything that includes the data, because our primary mission was to converge everything by virtue of introducing a new data architecture. So we think of that as Convergence 3.0. So if we put this in perspective, and this is a very interesting anecdote, all three companies, VCE, Nutanix, and SimpliVity, started in 2009. VCE started a little earlier. VCE time to market, 8 months. I envy them. 8 months from idea until you can put the product in the hands of a customer. Nutanix, according to the web, 18 months. Launched the company in September 2009, and according to Google, in April 2011, they already shipped their first VDI capability. And later that year, they won VDI Gold at VMworld. And indeed, this is a great technology for VDI. Doesn't require the enterprise capabilities such as protection, performance, data efficiency, and global unified management. Typically, customers don't need that for VDI. Took us 43 months. We only work Mondays and only half days. So it took us 43 months to bake that particular cake. However, we think that you cannot add any eggs into that cake once you've taken it out of the oven. So in summary, in Convergence 1.0, you get enterprise capability because basically you're taking the same products that you have in the legacy stack, you're just putting them in different containers. In 2.0, you get cloud economics. They call it web scale. x86 servers and storage. What we offer is the best of both worlds. Everything that we do is global, so a single admin runs the global federation, so to speak, on a per virtual machine basis. And I'm just going to share with you how this works technologically. So as we said, there are 3 technologies in play. And let's take this OmniCube and remove the bezel. We promised that there's x86 technology underneath, and indeed, you have HDD, SSD, DRAM, CPU running ESXi. On a typical, bless you, on a typical OmniCube, you have anywhere from 10 to 50 VMs, depending on the workload, of course. This still has no SimpliVity technology. And then, into that environment, we had our technology that includes the accelerator card. Basically, everything that we do on the card, we can do on Intel processors, but you would need a lot of Intel processors to do that job because Intel was not optimized to do that job, that data processing job. Maybe in 3-5 years they will, and then we'll run everything on Intel. By the way, all of our developers, and we have over 150 engineers, all of them run our code on their laptops. So we run on Intel today, just not efficient to deploy that in production, which is why you need the card. Without the card, everything that I've described and will describe is not possible. So if anybody tries to do deduplication or compression on Intel, you test them, you'll see that you lose anywhere from 40 to 80% of your performance. Run that test. When any vendor tells you that they're going to give you dedupe and compression, run that test, see what happens to performance when it runs on Intel. Let's remove the card and clarify that in our data virtualization platform, there are 2 layers, presentation layer and data management layer. Now let's assume that the SQL server on the upper left is about to write a 4K data set. This is the way the applications think. They think in 4 or 8K sets. As the data is written, we always register it in our index in the data management layer. So we register it, then we look down into the storage to see if it's already there. If that particular 4K set is not there, we compress it. Right? We can always compress. Your compression is going to vary in terms of efficiency, but you can always compress. Here's another red data set that the Exchange is about to write. We register it, we compress it. Why did we compress it? It's new. Here's another one, application number 3. We register it, we compress it. Don't be discouraged. Now we're going to start deduping. Here's another red data set. We already know that we have this one. So as it passes through our data virtualization platform, look what happened. We registered it, but we didn't write it to disk. We just deduped an IOP. Now, Amdahl is quoted saying that the best IO is the one you didn't have to write because IOPS are one of the most expensive resources in our data centers. We dedupe them once and forever globally. So whenever the applications write data that we already have, we don't need to rewrite it. So performance is actually increased. We don't need to write data. We just register it in our data management layer. So if we pick up the speed, the applications write a lot of data, faster than I'm presenting here. All of the writes are registered, and this is very difficult technology to develop. Think about it. We need to keep track of billions of 4 and 8K data sets globally with their descriptors. This is not easy stuff. Just giving some credit to our engineers. Now, the simple way of thinking about it is that we saved capacity. More importantly, we saved all these IOPS. So this is not a high functionality slow system. This is a high functionality fast system. If this story is true, you'll have to check that. Now, everything is global. So if we have 2 sites, the one in San Francisco and the one in New York, the data virtualization platform covers all of them. And let's assume that we want to take a full backup of this SQL server right here. So we just do that. Doesn't entail any IOPS to the disk. Just copy the metadata. If we now want to move that to New York instantly, as soon as we've taken the backup, we want to send it to New York. Basically, we send the metadata. This is not burdensome on the WAN. We just moved some signatures. Then we check what of the physical data in New York that's required in order to reconstitute that backup is already here. Because the nodes in New York are going to say, don't send me what I already have. They have a special communication protocol. Just send me what I need in order to reconstitute this backup, which, by the way, I can restore. Now, you should see a demo or have your IT team see a demo. This is when all of this comes together because it takes literally minutes to create new VMs, to copy VMs, to move them across the country. You can shut down a VM in site 1, move it to site 2. This is what we refer to as global unified management. So they can be in San Francisco and New York, but they can be elsewhere, all managed by one person, including backup and restore from Amazon. Everything is managed from vCenter. This is not our aesthetics. This is VMware's. This is the SimpliVity tab. From there, you can see all the nodes or all the data centers, and you can double-click, see the nodes in the data center, double-click, see the VMs in the data center, double-click, and see a single VM and manage it. So here is a long and agonizing day in the life of a single IO. The application, this is today's world, writes it to SSD. Then through the switch to the SSD in the storage. Then to tier 2 or tier 3 in the storage array. Then if you have a tier 3 storage array, that's another write. Then you back it up to, say, data domain, and if you want to move it to across the other side through Riverbed or any other WAN optimization to the other systems, and you probably also write it to the flash array, and if you want to go to the cloud, that's another I/O to the cloud gateway, and from there to the cloud. These are a lot of IOPS. There are a lot of resources tied up with doing all of that, and in most cases, deduping and compressing in each one of those phases. That's one option. This is the other option. You do it once and forever globally. Our ecosystem, of course, includes VMware. Some of you may have noticed that we've announced 3 weeks ago a relationship with Cisco. What that means is that today our technology is available on the OmniCubes that we sell with Dell inside. They're also available to those who prefer on a Cisco server. So basically, this is a joint offering with Cisco. Cisco chose us. We're very pleased about that. And this was a response to a lot of customers and partners who wanted to see our technologies work together. Nothing happens to our Dell relationship. We've just shipped hundreds of those systems. So basically, these are our cubes with Dell inside. We take first call, and we open tickets either with VMware or Dell, because everything is hyper-converged. So all the issues that customers might have are resolved by us, the server vendor, and VMware. So in summary, we think we offer the best of both worlds. x86 cloud economics, everything runs on x86, but now there are no excuses because we believe we also offer enterprise capabilities. The trick, the 43 months trick, if you care to invest, is to change the data architecture, which we believe cannot be changed after the fact. So when I present to my board and I'm asked about the competitive landscape, I say we should be concerned about companies we don't yet know about. The TCO reduction is 3x, but we have a TCO tool and we can run those measurements for any particular customer depending on her needs. And everything is global.